Now it's time for Lefties Losing It, and I think it's high time we checked on the leader of the free world. President Joe Biden has in recent days repeated another verifiable lie, this time telling West Point graduates that he was appointed to the Naval Academy. Sadly, that never actually happened.
I was appointed by the fellow I ran against when I was 29 years old to the Naval Academy. I was one of 10. I wanted to play football.
Of course, there's no record of any of this. Another Biden fantasy, but I guess it's a rather small lie compared to the ones he has told in recent weeks about cannibals and being arrested fighting for civil rights. Now, this next lass is always teaching us something. We do love her work on Lefties Losing It, where she has told us about the wacky world of neopronouns. That's for folks who identify as ravens or toasters or, I don't know, milk products. But today, she's going to teach us what non-binary terms we can call mum and dad, because, you know, mum and dad is so heteronormative.
Instead of using the typical mom and dad parent titles, there's actually gender-neutral and non-binary parent titles that exist. It can be hard for parents within the LGBTQIA+ community to find a word that they feel comfortable being addressed as by their children. So here are some examples. Dama, Mada, Maddie, Madi, Mappa, Nini, Nopa, Nori, Opa, Pere, Pom Pom, Zaza, and Zizi. You can find more examples on the website listed above.
To the University of North Carolina, and we like this university. You might remember that's where students staged a fight back against the anti-American lunacy taking over college campuses, where the frat boys gathered to protect the American flag as idiot protesters hurled abuse at them and few objects as well. And it's a university where the Board of Governors last week voted to repeal DEI policies, the diversity and inclusion policies, and instead replace it with this, saying things like ensure equality of all persons and viewpoints, wonderful, and promote non-discrimination in employment practices. Precisely what we want to see. But not everyone was happy with this new policy that embraces real equality and free speech. The campus lefties lost it and then got arrested.
They stand for colonization. They stand for discrimination. The police stand for peace. We are for power. We are for peace. We are for love. They are for discrimination. They are for exclusion. And they are for intimidation. That is what we're here for. We're here for love. They are directly opposed to love. They are like diametrically opposed to love.
Sarah, don't push her, Sarah. Don't touch her. Let go.
Everybody back. Step back.
Let go.
Step back.
Let go.
Step back. Step back. Step back. Look at them in the
Yeah, don't try that nonsense in North Carolina. Now, aren't you just thrilled that your taxes will be paying off the student loans of fiscally irresponsible fools who got themselves into enormous debt, often for junk degrees that don't actually help them get a decent job?
Like, sir, with all due respect, I mean this so respectfully. You took out over $150,000 worth of loans to basically learn how to cook. And I'm supposed to pretend to be surprised that you can't now afford to pay off these loans?
We all deserve to have an education and to follow our dreams. That's the American way.
It's a privilege to have an education. That's why we're all privileged to be Americans. My biggest issue with student loan forgiveness is that it's a lack of accountability for people's financially reckless decisions. Because you have these people, they take out these wildly massive loans to get a degree, to put themselves in a career path that they know from the get-go is never going to feasibly be able to pay off this amount of money.
Now, that intelligent young man on Dr. Phil is Xavier DeRusso, who made the lefty rent seekers lose it when he told them some harsh home truths.
I went to the University of Illinois with an academic full ride. My scholarships came from putting my back into my education. So why should I be responsible for paying off someone else's debt?
What makes this debt more righteous than the small plumber who took out a loan to buy a new van, or the person who got a mortgage? Or what makes it fair to the person who paid off their debts, to the parent who just wrote the last check for their son or daughter to go to college?
No one forced you to get those loans, so don't force me to pay it off. You can't be a part of the 12% of people in America who have student loan debt and then look at the 88% of us who aren't in that situation and expect us to pay off the decision you made.
Race, class, gender, all play an important role to my access. This isn't just about student loan debt. This is about equal access to generational wealth.
Equal access to generational wealth. That sounds like communism. No, thank you. That's a poisonous doctrine that has killed millions, tens of millions. By the way, here is some good news. Biden's latest student loan handout could cost as much as $750 billion. Did I say good news? I didn't mean that. I don't know why I said good. I think we could all do with a laugh right now. Here is a young man who decided he was going to join a queer fat club. Problem is, he's not really fat or queer, but you know, he can identify as a trans fat.
This is a queer fat club.
I'm queer and fat.
Okay, thank you for joining. We're just introducing ourselves at the moment.
Okay.
Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, Joe?
Yeah, my name's Joe. I go by he, they, and I identify as 275 pounds.
Okay.
I feel like Jay's kind of making fun of me though. I know it's kind of a shock. I know, kind of a new thing.
I'm just,
Do what?
I said I apologize.
Oh no, you're good.
Are you comfortable leaving the group at the moment?
Why?
I'm not understanding why you're joining the group.
This is the queer and fat group now.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I came here for.
Okay. And you said you identify as fat?
Yeah.
Okay. This is just for fat-bodied people.
Yeah, I understand. I identify as a fat-bodied person.
I'm not understanding where you're coming from.
Are you guys comfortable with me here? I mean, I'm pretty chill on my end.
I'm not comfortable, no.
Very droll work. Now let's do more lefties losing it with my next guest. And here is US Senate leader Chuck Schumer revealing that the Democrats want more immigrants, illegal or not, and they want them all to become citizens who can vote. I thought that was a conspiracy theory.
Now more than ever, we're short of workers. We have a population that is not reproducing it on its own with the same level that it used to. The only way we're going to have a great future in America is if we welcome and embrace immigrants, the dreamers, and all of them, because our ultimate goal is to help the dreamers, but get a path to citizenship for all 11 million or however many undocumented there are here.
Let's bring in senior editor at large for Newsweek, Josh Hammer. Josh, what do you make of Chuck Schumer's comments there? It wasn't long ago that if you suggested that the Democrats wanted all these illegal immigrants to cross the border because they'd eventually become Democrat voters, you were called some sort of crazy conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, I mean, how many times recently in American politics do we need to see yet another example of what was once dismissed as a so-called far-right conspiracy theory, which has been once again been validated because of these crazy times that we're living in? I mean, I see clips like this, Rita, and I think back to, you know, the crazy conspiracy theory that the COVID-19 pandemic might have emerged from the lab in Wuhan, China, or that crazy conspiracy theory that Hunter Biden's laptop was in fact very, very real and was not just fabricated by Russian intelligence assets, as 51 U.S. deep state spooks promptly said in a statement that was issued by the feds roughly 24 hours after the New York Post story came to light in October 2020. This is just the latest indication in a very long and very unflattering line of conspiracy theories that are no longer conspiracy theories. By the way, what Chuck Schumer is saying there, getting to the substance of his remarks, what he is saying there at the beginning of that clip we just heard, where he is saying that America's population is not reproducing the way it used to. We're simply not having enough babies. Well, empirically speaking, he happens to be right about that. America's current birth rate is roughly 1.6 to 1.65 children per childbearing woman, which is well below replacement level. But how about you look at that and then you do something about it. How about you try to make America a better and more appealing place in which to raise children? How about you try to change the material incentives? You try to grow the economy. Don't just tell Americans that they're being too selfish or that they're not taking enough abortion pills or something crazy like that, so it's not reproducing the next generation. You're identifying a good problem there, Chuck Schumer. The solution is not just to willy-nilly import mass third worlders who simply do not share our values. The solution is to make America a better place to have more children.
We've got more Democrats embarrassing themselves. Here's start with Ilhan Omar, one of the squad members here, who tweeted this on Memorial Day, obviously not understanding what the day is supposed to commemorate. And another squad member, Congresswoman Cori Bush, also tweeted this, mentioning all sorts of things, universal health care and affordable housing. Both those tweets have now been deleted, Josh, because presumably someone in their staff told them what Memorial Day actually means.
Yeah, look, lefties, Rita, have a very, very long-standing habit of trying to universalize messages that ought to be particularist. So, you know, to give just one example, I mean, I'm Jewish, and we have a very long history in America of politicians, especially from the Democratic side of the aisle, who take many of our Jewish holidays, such as Passover, which is, of course, about the exodus from Egypt and the liberation of the Jewish people, and trying to universalize this message to be any kind of just kind of hold our hands, smoke a peace pipe, kumbaya kind of thing. They try to take the Passover message and they'll twist it and turn it to be about the liberations of LGBT rights or the liberation of illegal aliens, a la Chuck Schumer's clip there. This, to me, is very much in that line where you take a very specific, particular day. Memorial Day here in America is a very solemn day. It is where we remember those who gave the ultimate sacrifice to defend this last great nation, this last dying, perhaps, but this last still in existence gasp of freedom in Western civilization, and we look to those who gave the ultimate sacrifice, and we pay our very solemn respects. To quote the great General George Patton, today on Memorial Day here in America is not a day to be sad, to mourn those who die, but rather to thank God that such men live. That's the quote from George Patton, and to take that message and to try to do what Cori Bush and Ilhan Omar and these various other squad far left nut jobs are doing and talking about, you know, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, universal health care, Palestinian rights, illegal aliens, totally missing the forest for the trees. But it's not just accidental, Rita. I think that there is a slight dose of intentionality here. They know what they're doing. They are trying to undermine America's solemn traditions and holidays in favor of their very tendentious agenda.
Probably, but it's interesting that this time around they deleted those tweets. I think a couple of years ago they may have not, but I don't know. We're in an election year. Maybe they're a little bit more sensitive. You might remember this classic from Kamala Harris a couple of years ago. I think this was actually her first year as Veep. And she posted this for Memorial Day. Enjoy the long weekend. That really is just so poignant, isn't it? Goodness me. Now, there's been a number of attacks, Josh, from trans assailants in recent years. It's hard not to notice. I'm not suggesting they're disproportionately represented in the stats. Someone else can look into the figures and let me know about that. But there have been several instances of men identifying as women and a couple of women identifying as men being behind really violent, disturbing crimes. And there was another one over the weekend. The New York Post repeats that the knifeman accused of stabbing 6 people, including 3 children, and suspected of killing another, appears to have been in the process of changing their identity, and they insist on being called a she.
Look, this is, once again, just another data point in what is a longstanding problematic trend. I mean, look, it feels like it was just yesterday. Our news cycle moves so quickly now that we forget that this was over a year ago now. There was the school shooting in Nashville, Tennessee, of the Covenant School, of that Christian school, by a former student of that school who it turns out was a transgender individual. And what this individual did was they went back to that school, and then before going to shoot up and try to murder children there who were just attending a school on a given day in March 2023, first went to the church that connects to the school and shot at the stained glass depiction of the prophet Abraham, the great patriarch Abraham, the father of all three monotheistic religions. What would compel someone who was a former Christian school student who became a transgender person to shoot up a stained glass depiction of the father of all of Western monotheistic religion? I mean, the question kind of answers itself, right? There's something very deeply psychologically troubling going on here. And I'm not a psychologist, so don't take it from me. I mean, go back and look at the DSM-3, the DSM-4. I mean, gender dysphoria, up until fairly recently, was a universally recognized social malady, and it was a psychological malady for which the proper treatment was seeing a psychologist, seeing a psychiatrist, and ultimately getting some form of advanced kind of psychological training. It was only in fairly recent memory, Rita, that we have decided to not just bestow this an imprimatur of legitimacy, but to try to kind of, give it much praise and adoration and all this as well. I am waiting for conservatives to try to make this point articulately, because a lot of people tend to kind of put out a lot of fiery rhetoric without much substance or policy beef behind it there. But at this point, this is too big of a problem to simply ignore. I mean, if you are a man who thinks that you are a woman, we should have compassion and we should encourage you to seek help. But to pretend like this is just a normal situation, just to keep on going on, people are ultimately going to continue to die and get wounded and tragically just murdered by people just like this, I fear, unless we get to the bottom of what's actually going on psychologically.
Now, this is interesting, Josh. Silicon Valley is turning away from the Democrats, we are told. I'm not sure if I believe this, but we have investors and venture capitalists saying it's becoming impossible to support Joe Biden. What do you make of this? I mean, this is something that has been very much a stronghold for the Democrats. Silicon Valley has traditionally lent left quite strongly. Could they come around to embracing Donald Trump?
It really does seem almost impossible. I mean, of all of America's major industries, big tech and Silicon Valley is, as you accurately say, by far one of the most reliable Democratic Party voting blocks. I mean, it's right there, literally in Northern California, which is about as blue an area of America as it possibly gets. I kind of have to wonder here if the Elon Musk trend on Twitter or X, whatever we're calling it these days, if that trend is actually kind of auguring a broader kind of paradigm and shift. Now, look, the Democratic Party is no actual friend of the big tech platforms. When they actually get into power, they're frequently threatening to bust them up when it comes to antitrust. Democrats, just like Republicans, are actually very critical of what in America we call Section 230 immunity, although they're critical of it for very different reasons than Republicans tend to be. So they're actually not particularly favorable to Democrats when they get in office. Maybe between that and the fact that Joe Biden himself is obviously palpably senile in the extreme and quite literally barely even knows what day it is ending and why on any given day, maybe they're starting to kind of peel away towards Trump on the margins here. But I really do find the Elon Musk possibility here particularly fascinating. If you look at kind of the human fabric of Silicon Valley, you look at kind of the Sergey Brin's, Larry Page, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, it's actually a fairly small cabal of people who are kind of the true kingpins of this industry. You're probably talking here about 20 to 25 people at the most. So when someone like Elon Musk can actually take over a whole platform and really put it in a very different and in many ways a more positive direction, I'm really wondering whether that actually has had a serious effect on how his various kind of classmates in that Silicon Valley upper class, how they view their relationship to American politics as well.
Well, Elon sacked, 80, 90% of Twitter, now X's employees, and we were told the whole thing was going to collapse, and yet it's more popular than ever. It seems to have more activity, more users than ever. And that's, to me, one of the most astonishing things we've seen in the last couple of years, that you could sack 90% of a workforce, a well-paid workforce, and really have no difference in the product, in the user experience.
Yeah, look, I mean, as a conservative who is on Twitter a decent amount, probably more than I should be, You know, look, I mean, in some ways, I mean, the free speech absolutism can be a bit of a problem. So you see some accounts that are viciously racist, viciously anti-Semitic, viciously anti-Western, that tend to get boosted here. But I mean, that kind of is just free speech playing out the way that it's supposed to be. And there are some downsides of that. There are also a lot of upsides of that. I know that I am not going to get banned from Twitter tomorrow, Rita, for simply saying the biological truism that there is male and there is female, there is XX chromosomal structure and there's XY chromosomal structure. Back in the pre-Elon Musk status quo ante, back when Jack Dorsey and the rest of the far left clown brigade, back when they were running Twitter, you could literally be banned for the platform for saying what I just said on your show, is that there are two genders as we have known throughout the entire history of humanity. And it's very nice to have a social platform now where that you're not going to get just banned or shadow banned or blocked willy-nilly for saying such very commonsensical things.
Josh Hammer, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Rita.